recorded live.
Well, hello once again, folks. This is Michael, and it's Nothing But the Truth. We'll answer you to find it. And, well, we got a new guest, and I'm looking forward to talking to this woman. She's has done some very interesting research, to say the least. Rita Jean Morin, and she has an interesting website, Hidden Human Story, and she has a YouTube channel by the same name. Interesting, I'll just read a few of the playlists, just the titles. Little People and Other Things, My Work and Research, Hidden Human Story Radio, Mythology and Symbolism, Egypt, Anthropology, The Ancient Ones, History, Lovelock Cave and the Red-Haired Giants, Native Americans, The Diaries of Dionysus. And a little bit about Rita, you can find, and I'll read this real fast. If you go to her web page, about, it says here, Rita Jean Morin has always enjoyed studying ancient cultures, legends, folklore, and mythology, and has observed that most ancient stories are very similar across all cultures, including stories of floods, giants, and little people. She's visited many of the places she writes about. The cover art of many of her books includes her own photography with some imaginary illustrations into the photographs. And then it goes here further. One day when she took her family to visit a cave in Texas, an idea was born inside her mind. It started out as a set of children's books and has blossomed into finding what she believes is the true and factual story that has never been told before. She began with writing the library kids. After this visit to the cave, after doing years of research and writing of her own children's series, she formulated what she calls the mythological unification theory. This theory tells the story of what she terms the Chronide bloodline and their global travels and civilization of the world between 15,000 and 19,000 years ago. Rita Jean Morin has since written a new series called her Hidden Human Story series for more mature audience that tells the tale of this family. One more paragraph here. Hidden History Story looks at the secrets of the past with an emphasis on the Chronides, mythology, legends, folklore, bloodlines, symbolism, the news, the occult, religion, obscure archaeological finds. It is the goal of the author of this website to present the hidden story of our past based on many years of research in ancient texts from Harvard Loeb Library, the British Library, and many other sources: comparative mythology, comparative anthropology, the study of symbolism, obscure archaeological finds, and modern DNA tests. And with that, Rita, thank you for joining me on the show. I do appreciate you being willing to spare some time with me. I find your research to be very fascinating, and I've got a feeling you're on to something here. So with that, thank you for joining me, Rita.
Thank you, Michael, and hello to your audience.
Yes, and my audience, I'm sure, is going to be going, "Why are you doing this, Mike?" But it is nothing but the truth, and I respect what Rita's doing. So, Rita, I know I just did quite a bit of your bio there about who you are, but tell us more about this research. I mean, you say you went to a cave and it sparked something in you. What happened to get you to go down this path? Because you're going down a path that, let's be honest, most are not going down.
Right.
if any, which I really respect, and I think you really are on to something. So.
Okay. Well, let me continue on with the intro here, as you've done very well. So, I had kids. I used to work a mainstream job. I was an engineer, software engineer, and I had kids, and I stayed home. But with kids, you want to entertain them, and so I started to, travel a little bit and take them to interesting places that you take your children to, museums and caves and various things that families do. And I went down to this cave in Texas, and it was amazing. It was outside of San Antonio. It was just like a cathedral. And there wasn't anything in there. It was just the cave. And when I was in there, I thought it was like another world. It was like magical. And so I started to think of a story, and it blossomed into these children's books called The Library Kids. And The Library Kids is based on a group of children that find a secret magical library inside a cave, but this is up in Wisconsin. And with this library, they could go back in time and anywhere around the world that they want to. And in the 7-book series, I had the children travel all over the place and learn about ancient mythology and the people and history as well. And at the end of the first book, they end up with a mission, and that mission is they have to battle this evil entity and 7 entities that work with it that try and stop knowledge from coming into the world. And they work with the librarian and this Lord of Light, if you will, or good spirit, whatever you want to call it. And they have to collect a set of crystals. And at the end, they do, and they put the bad guy in a jail, and life goes on. So it was made for the middle grade audience, 8 to 12-year-olds and up. I found that even adults enjoyed it as I went out and would sell it on my own. And I'm an independent author. At one point, I used to write screenplays trying to break into Hollywood, but that didn't go. The furthest I got was optioned, and it didn't go anywhere. So I kind of gave up on that and decided to just go independent. So I'm completely independent. It's just me. There's no one behind me or anything like that. So I started to get into this children's series and sell it and learn. But the mythology that I was looking into really caught my interest. And when I was done with this series, by the time I finished the 7th book, I ended up stumbling into something I didn't think was going to happen. It was like going down a rabbit hole. Now, I started off looking at children's books or just regular books on mythology, but then I started to see tidbits here and there of text that was quoted from books in a library out of Harvard University. And it piqued my interest, and I started to look into it, and it's called the Loeb Library. And currently it's a set of over 500 books that came from translations of the original authors who are mainly Greek and Roman. There's one Egyptian author. Over 500 books. And it gives the history of the Western world per these scholars. And it's something I had never seen before, never heard about it in school or anything. So I began to look at the catalog and research it because it had a lot of information on Greek mythology and the Greek gods. And I picked out through the catalog the books I wanted to read. And as I began to start to read this, I could tell that there was a story in there that seemed more than just a myth. It was more than just a lesson for learning. So, you still there, Michael?
I am.
Okay,
I'm enjoying just listening to you.
Okay, so I'm going to continue on.
What a wonderful story. So.
Okay, I'm going to continue on. I could go on and on.
Well, that's what I'm
Believe me.
hoping, and I hope that this is more
I
than just one visit, because
oh,
the story and what you have to share here, it's pretty profound, and I think you really have been on. You're tying in some missing pieces, and we live in a well, we live in a day and an age where there's an awful lot of opinion out there and a lot of
lies.
destruction, and there's lies, deception, extreme amount of deception. So,
yes, and it's
but
done on purpose.
yes, it is, and we definitely will go through that. But you continue with your story, please.
Okay, so as I said, I started to pick out these books, and let me stop for a minute and tell you about the Loeb Library. Now, the Loeb Library was created in 1911 by a gentleman named James Loeb. James Loeb was a Jewish, German, American banker philanthropist, and he put up the money for it. Now, let me tell you a little bit about his background. He came from a very well-to-do banker family, the Loebs. And they were very strict Jewish people, and James fell in love with a Christian woman, and his family would not allow him to marry her because she wasn't Jewish. They said she's a Gentile. And they told him, you cannot marry her or you will be completely disinherited and on your own. And we don't approve, and they won't be a part of this family. So he lost the love of his life. The other part about James is he wanted to be an archaeologist, and he loved the classic literature from the Greeks and the Romans. He was a Hellenist, which is somebody that studies the Greek history. He also loved music, and that's the path that he wanted to go down, but his family would not allow that. They told him, you're going to have to come into the banking industry and work with us for the family business, and you have to marry a Jewish woman. Well, he didn't get married because he lost the love of his life, and he did go in and work in the banking industry for a few years, but he ended up, from what all description on the internet is, sounds like he had a mental breakdown after a few years, and he had to quit, and he ended up moving from New York to Germany to be kind of left alone. He ended up down the road having a second nervous breakdown as well, but he recovered, and the money that he had inherited, he put to good use. He took it, and he gave money to fund this Loeb Library out of Harvard. And that started off in 1911, and James Loeb died in 1933, but that library continues on, and it now has over 500 books in it. Very interesting books that we all need to know about. And he also put money into the Juilliard, the predecessor of the Juilliard School, because he was interested in the music and arts. And another, I believe, a hospital for psychiatry he was funding. And he ended up marrying his nurse. He didn't have children, but he had stepsons. And he, with the bulk of the remainder of his money, he basically gave to them after he died. So we have Mr. Loeb to thank for it, and he couldn't let go of his interest. There was something that really drove him, and it caused him heartache in life. But we have him to thank for this library. Now, let's get to what is in this library, and it's not just the Loeb Library that I've been researching. There's the British Library as well, and there's other books from independent researchers that tell the story of this family. And I'm just going to come out and say what this family is, that my theory is, it's a group of real people that came out of ancient Tyre, ancient Crete. They were giants. They were of giant stature. They were white. Their hair is described in many of the texts. Some had red hair, some had golden hair, some had auburn hair, dark locks, which would be your auburn hair. And they inbred a lot. They married sisters, and that might make sense if you're 9 to 12 feet tall or 8 feet tall like a Viking. If you tend to breed out, then you lose that height advantage. So this family basically was starting like a colony in Tyre, and they had some issues with infighting, and they the bottom line is they ended up spreading out all over the place, and they became your Greek gods. And they are, and I'm going to just say what this mythological unification theory states is that I've formulated, they're the gods of every culture. Because these books out of that library specifically state and tell you of their journeys around the world and who they encountered and what happened. And their bloodline went to all of the nations of the earth and became your royal bloodlines. They, the kings and queens of Ireland, the pharaohs, the kings of Germany and France, the kings in ancient Sumer, over into the Americas as well, I believe. Now, the problem with this family is they had a part of the family that was cruel to other humans, and the other part of the family didn't like that and would chase them around the world to get rid of the bad behavior. And that bad behavior was basically killing and eating the average person, causing them to participate in human sacrifice of their children, slavery, just all of your bad behavior. And the other part of the family chased them around to end those rituals and those cults. Now, I'm going to start giving some of the proof, and then we'll get more into the detail of this family. One of the, many of the authors that I've looked at, for example, the Greek one, Diodorus Siculus, wrote his books over 2,000 years ago. This is a Greek scholar that spent 30 years of his life traveling to Egypt and various places to gather the history of the world. And he wrote a series of 40 books called the Library of History. 20 of them remained, about 20, and the rest are gone, and I'm going to bet the rest are gone for a reason. But from what is left, I bet they never figured that somebody like me would find and stumble on. Now, before I read some of the important stuff out of Diodorus Siculus's The Library of History, let me just give you a brief overview of the other authors. Nonnus wrote the Dionysica, which is the story of Dionysus. Very important. It talks about how Dionysus, which I'm going to reveal his other names, went into India and conquered the Indians. He went all over Egypt. He went all over Greece, and I believe also the rest of the world. Macrobius tells you about wrote the Saturnalia, tells you about the story of Cronus. Valerius Maximus was a Roman scholar. We're going to talk about why he's important in a minute. And there's other ones like Plutarch and Plato you've heard of. Virgil wrote about the Romans. Aeneas was a surviving Trojan prince that ended up going into Italy, and his descendants came up into England, Brutus, and they became the ancestors of King Arthur. And that bloodline eventually was replaced by the current royal British bloodline that came from a different place. Now, let's just read something here, and we're going to start to unravel this mythological unification theory with some proof. Okay, from Diodorus Siculus' The Library of History, Volume 1, page 39. Quote, "And of the ancient Greek writers of mythology, some give to Osiris the name Dionysus, or with a slight change in form, Sirius. One of them, Eumpulus, in his Bacchic hymn, speaks of our Dionysus shining like a star with fiery eye in every ray." Okay, I'm going to stop. What I've just done now is connected your Greek, Roman, and Egyptian mythologies, because I've now just revealed that the true identity of Osiris is the Greek Dionysus, the god of wine and the arts, and eventually it's going to show you he's taught them some things about other farming as well. Now, I'm going to read further from Diodorus Siculus' The Library of History as to what the problem was in the world. Okay, quote, "Osiris was the first they record to make mankind give up cannibalism. For after Isis had discovered the fruit of both wheat and barley, which grew wild over the land along with the other plants, but was still unknown to man, And Osiris had also devised the cultivation of these fruits. All men were glad to change their food, both because of the pleasing nature of the newly discovered grains and because it seemed to their advantage to refrain from their butchery of one another. As proof of the discovery of these fruits, they offer the following ancient custom, which they still observe. Even yet at harvest time, the people make a dedication of the first heads of the grain to be cut, and standing beside the sheaf, beat themselves and call upon Isis. By this act, rendering honor to the goddess for the fruits which she discovered at the season when she first did this. Okay, I'm going to stop, end quote. So I just told you that there is a problem with cannibalism and savagery, and that these people corrected it. They were very skilled farmers and also skilled in the arts. They were very skilled in star knowledge. And as I go on, I'll talk about a few other things, but they ended it. They taught good things and how to grow food from the earth and not to be a cannibal.
Can you hear me, Rita?
Yes.
Okay. Listen, the question I have, you brought up cannibalism, and that it seemed to be a universal problem throughout the world. Do you think that, when you read about in the Bible, it talks about the forbidden fruit, the tree of knowledge of good and evil? Is there a connection, do you think, between the two?
Absolutely. It's a connection to a bloodline, in my opinion. And that I'm not sure if we'll get to in this show. As we go on, I'm going to show your audience who Satan is and who God is and how this all goes back to bloodlines. And this is, going to be based on what I've read. But that tree of good and evil, I believe, represents the bloodline, possibly Satan.
Interesting.
And that's my opinion. You can take what you want from that, but that is my opinion. That's
right. Well, as you've been bringing up, and it just seems to be wherever you go, there has been a problem with cannibalism.
They still have a problem with it in Africa. The little black, the pygmies, the black people, the little ones in there, they're getting eaten today. They're harassed and put in slavery, and they live in the jungles of the Congo, and they're harassed by the other black tribes today, and they're eaten. And you can read about that on the internet. There's articles. In fact, there was some a white guy wrestler. He actually went over there to help them. I don't know what's going on with that right now, but there's articles right now. These poor, people are just harassed and put in slavery, and they're eaten today. They're killed and eaten today.
Well, and it's not just there. I mean, there's China,
Papua New Guinea. There's a video on the internet with guys bragging about how he's eating people and how it tastes.
Yeah, and there's the vast number of disappearing people that are never found.
Yeah.
And could there be a connection with all this? I mean,
it could be a ritual. It's a sick ritual. Which,
right.
And somebody has a problem. But these, some of these way off in the jungle tribes, they're still doing it. And it's also like a power thing. Like they feel that they absorb the life force and the power of the person as well. And I think Captain Cook was eaten by the Polynesians, and then I think they returned parts of him or something. That's a controversial subject. What I talk about, there's a certain amount of people that get upset when you start bringing these things up,
like Native Americans and
well, I even get just regular people,
Yeah.
And I'm not doing this to be ignorant to any race or people. I'm just stating this is what is in the literature, and this is a fact, and that this is going on today. And it's not a bash on any people because every race has its good and bad. I'm just telling you, this is what happened, and it's still going on in small pockets around the world today.
Yeah, I agree with you. It might even be worse than what you just said today.
I hope not.
But you never know. I mean, when you look at the behavior, look at World War II and the behavior of the Eastern Front and what was going on between the warring parties in Germany and and Russia and etc. A lot of really wicked things happen, and there's something about man. And
well, if you're desperate too, let's look at the Donner Party. That wasn't to be a ritual. They were starving. They had no choice, and they had to. But they cannibalized the dead. They didn't kill people to do that. But that's like a last resort. That's like when there's no hope and you have to make decisions because the rescue's coming.
But then there's other people and other groups like you've mentioned earlier, and some of you probably will mention. There's whether it's Southwest America or up in Canada here, even my neck of the woods in Ohio. If you look back, there's this replete history of eating cannibalism, eating your.
Absolutely, there's an extensive history all over the Americas of it, and a very esteemed anthropologist, Dr. Christy Turner out of Arizona, got a lot of flack, but he revealed over 75 sites in the Southwest of America where cannibalism was and extensive warfare was occurring with the Anasazis culture and whoever else was out there. And nobody's really put together yet what happened. And the Lovelock Cave people were accused of cannibalism, and I'll talk about that down the road here. And there was evidence on 3 bones out of that cave of cannibalism, the mummies that were found out of there and some bones. But they were in a warfare situation. The red-haired people were exterminated by the Paiutes, according to Sarah Winnemucca. But there was extensive warfare. There were giants all over the Americas, as well as the average, whatever you want to call Native American, and little people all over. All kinds of stories. Lovelock Cave, Tyranina up in Wisconsin. I was just out to Georgia, Etowah Mounds, and they have effigies of a woman with red hair and a man with red ears. Now, why are these Siberian Native Americans creating effigies that they buried in the mounds with a woman with red hair? Completely red hair. There's no explanation. And then the Mississippian culture had this symbol of a hand with an eye in it. Well, that's the Middle Eastern Mediterranean Hamza. It's the same symbol. But when you bring these things up, you get very agitated people, and it's not even just Native Americans, whatever you assume they are. I get white people that get angry at me. I've some of the things that I've gotten on YouTube are just mind-blowing, the things said to me, and I'm not here to insult anybody. I'm here to just say, look, something's missing in our history. They're lying and covering it up, but these are touchy subjects. But the stories are there, so either these Native Americans are telling the truth, and there's so many of them, like the Yurok woman, Lucy Thompson, talked about white people all over the Americas when they came, and that they would interbreed with some of them, and some of them left. You have red-haired mummies in Peru, and don't forget you also had headhunters, not headhunters, but the tribes that would shrink heads next to that area. And there's something on one of my my YouTube videos, I put it on my Facebook. There's a shrunken head with red hair that ended up in the British Museum from South America, or over in England somewhere. It was some museum over in England. And I'm like, look at this thing. It's got red hair. What in the world is going on here? And why aren't we having our mainstream anthropologists getting off their behind and actually doing their job, and instead of someone like me who's interested in this and stumbles in it, and I have to ask these questions. I'm not getting paid for this. This is something I could just see that there's a problem. They're not telling the truth of what went on here on this planet. So continuing on with that, I've told you about this family. I call it the Cronites, okay? I just want to read it. There's a timeline given in this Loeb library.
Can you tell me and the audience what you mean by Cronites?
Cronites is the bloodline of Zeus.
Okay.
Zeus came from Cronus. They had many children. Today, in Western society, usually you have a wife and a husband, and they have kids. And if they get divorced, they marry again. You might have some half sisters, or you might have some step brothers and sisters. Okay, these people would have. This was their custom. They would have a main wife, and it was usually their full-blooded sister. And they would have children, and the children of that marriage would be the heir to whatever they had, their land, the kingdom, whatever it was. Then they would have consorts of their tribe. So you'd have a man that could have over 150 kids in his lifetime. And some of the women had also multiple partners, okay? So this is what their customs were.
It's
still
going on. It's still going on today, by the way. So
yeah. Well, so when I say Chronide, I'm talking about this Zeus, who went back to Cronus. They call him a Chronide because his father was Cronus. Now, Cronus had other children. And before I get into the history of what happened to Cronus, if it would be okay, I'd like to just connect a few more of these mythologies.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Okay, well, first of all, there's a timeline in that Diodorus Siculus' Library of History. Okay, here it says, quote, the number of years from Osiris and Isis, they say, to the reign of Alexander, who founded the city which bears his name in Egypt, is over 10,000, but according to other writers, a little less than 23,000. Well, Alexander the Great lived about 2,300 years ago, somewhere around there. Add that, you're talking about 12,000 to 25,000 years ago that these people lived. My estimate of 15,000 to 19,000 years ago comes from my research and also looking at the Manetho book on Egypt, which gives a timeline of all of these pharaohs going back to Osiris and Isis. Now, the important thing to note is that there were two pharaonic bloodlines out of Egypt. One came from Dionysus Osiris and his wife Isis, who, by the way, with my research, is Ariadne from Crete. That was his cousin or niece or something. I'm sorry, it was like a niece. And she is that woman from the story of the Minotaur and the Labyrinth. They got together and went into Egypt and started the Osirian pharaoh line, which ended up in Ireland, along with Dionysus' I guess it would be half-sister Athena, who is the Celtic goddess Bridget. But they ended up in Ireland, or those bloodlines ended up in Ireland. But getting back to Egypt, you have this Osirian bloodline, but you had a bloodline from Set. Set is Prometheus. And I have text out of this library that specifically talks about Prometheus being in Egypt, setting up a kingdom. And he had red hair. That was his trademark, whatever you want to call it, red hair. The red-haired Setian pharaohs. And they were opposed to the Osirian pharaohs. And the story is that Prometheus, or Set, and they even call him the Egyptian Typhon because there was a different Typhon. That's why they say Egyptian Typhon, because these people have so many different names. You have to follow the story to put it together, and I'm still working on that. But what had happened allegedly is that Dionysus slept with one of the wives of Set, and that kind of pushed him over the edge, and set Prometheus with 72 other conspirators and the queen of Ethiopia. I think her name was Aso. I got to go back and look at what her name was. They set up a party and invited Osiris after he had finished all of his wars in India and subduing it and set everything up. And they invited him and other people to sit in this box that was beautifully decorated. He was the last one, and it was made for his size, but he didn't realize that. And he got in, and as soon as he got in, they put a cover on it and sealed it with molten lead and threw him in the river to die. And his wife Isis had to go and find him and she did. And she brought his body back up to Egypt and buried it, and then sound it and chopped it up. So she had to take body parts and bury them in different parts around Egypt.
Hey, Rita.
Yeah.
Are you moving around?
Just my book, and can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but there's a lot of crackling going on.
Oh yeah, I heard that too.
I noticed it was on a couple of your videos as well. I don't know if you got.
I have a blue ball mic. I don't know. I got a new mic because hopefully it's okay.
Sounds like you might have like a little loose wire or something.
Oh, okay. I'll have to check it. I'll try not to move around too much. So basically, she had to get those body parts back. The son Anubis is the one who helped her, mummify the bodies, and they gave them to the priests to bury it all around Egypt, so nobody knew. What she did was she took a body part and put it into a wax figure of Osiris, and so nobody knew where the real body of Osiris was buried, and it could be scattered throughout all of Egypt. But she ended up having to survive with her children against this Set. And,
hey, Rita,
yeah.
I hate to be rude here, but can you what are you a headless or wired headphone? Is it
it's a
wireless?
one. What are you hearing?
I'm hearing a lot of crackling, so I don't know. Maybe it's the wire. Can you wiggle the wire a little bit and see what happens?
Yeah, that's strange. Okay, hold on a second. Oh. No, I mean I'm plugged in directly. Is that any better? Is that any better?
No, not really. That's weird.
You're very clear, so I don't know what's going on.
Well, it's something on your end, so it's just crackling. Sounds like it's dying down a little bit. So.
Okay, maybe I'll back away from the mic, and maybe I'm too close or something. Let's see if that's any better. Is that any better?
Well, you sound good. It's just there's a crackling going on. So, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, interesting. All right, so she ended up having to survive and keep that bloodline going, and Egypt was divided between Upper and Lower Egypt. The Osirian had Lower Egypt, and the Setian had Upper Egypt. And eventually, about 6,000 years ago, Egypt combined into one kingdom and continued on for about 6,000 more years until the Greeks and the Romans came in and took over, and then now whatever's there. So this is like I said, this is a bloodline that has gone all over, has become part of these royal families. Apollo ended up in Sweden, Artemis as well. The sister of Zeus would be Demeter, was in Sicily. Her father, Cronus, had made deals with King Janus, who was a different family in Italy after he was teaching them how to cultivate the soil. And so they went out to Italy as well and continued on. Now, there is a ritual in Egypt about killing the red heifer.
Right.
That is.
Let's stop right there and let's see what's going on. Okay. Now, there's really a lot of crackling going on, and I don't want to be wasting your time. I want people to hear this because this is very good stuff, and I'm trying to think of what could we do because it seems to be bad when you're talking.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but you're good because there's a lot of crackling behind it. It's like
okay, I'm not sure because there's absolutely no crackling on my end. You're as clear as day.
Well, let's just continue and let's pray that we. You get the message.
Maybe somebody doesn't want me to talk. I don't know.
I would imagine because I know this kind of if even partially what you're going to about share with us is true, it does screw up the official narrative.
It screws everything up.
Yeah, and this is my show is turning to be about. So, yeah, when you're learning, searching for the truth here, it leads you in paths and directions you never thought, and how much of what we believe is reality is nothing close. It's hardly anything close to what is reality. So, but you were talking about the red heifer, and this is something obviously that's very interesting. It's important to quote unquote Jewish people. And their faith, and their religion, and their temple. But go ahead.
Okay, there was a ceremony in a ritual in Egypt. They would kill the red heifer because it symbolized killing Set, who is Satan, because of what he did to Osiris. And they would also attack red-haired men because of what this red-haired Set had done. Now, you always hear that the red-haired stepchild or the, red-haired devil, red skin, because he had the flushing due to being light, pale skin and red hair. So he appeared to have red skin.
Interesting.
So that's why you get these, red devil.
You think that's the reason why the modern day depiction of the devil is always these, red?
He's red. Yes. Pitchfork. Absolutely. Okay. He's also associated with the bull, as all of the Cronides are, because the bull was used extensively in agriculture. They taught people how to use it to plow the earth. That was incredibly important. The bull, Zeus is represented by the bull. Cronus is represented by the bull. Prometheus is represented by a bull, a red bull.
No, do these
Osiris is as well.
These individuals, do they have like horns like they depict, or was it based on some kind of?
No, I think that's more.
Their garb, their tradition,
their garb,
authority, power is what it represents.
It's symbolism. The bull has horns.
Okay.
And when these people do that symbol of the horns, that cornuto.
Yeah, like George Bush and everyone.
Yeah. Okay, that's a symbol of the bull. But you have to look at when these people start throwing up hand signs or symbol, the one eye nonsense, all of look at the context and who are these people doing it. What side of the family is that getting thrown up for? Now, it's interesting because you have a rock and roller putting up that hand sign like, ooh, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, kick butt. But in Italy, my understanding is when you throw that symbol up, it means that your wife is cheating on you with another man.
Really?
And it's an insult. Okay? So you need to look at the context of what this is. Now, a Cronide blessing is two fingers pointed up and the thumb as well. That's a blessing, and you'll see your popes doing that. That's the blessing that you will see Zeus and Demeter doing in the ancient artwork.
Well, what about those folks who are saying that it's it's reverence and symbolic to Satan?
No, not the two. Well, you've got to look at, are they mocking God? That whole one eye thing. Okay, here, let me just pull this passage out, and you're going to understand the one eye thing here in a minute. I'm going to.
Because they're using it all over the place, whether it's
they're playing with us. They're making fun of us, and they're basically showing that they're powerful and they've taken charge, and it's just a laugh at us at our expense. Let me here explain this. How Zeus is also Odin. From Snorri Sturluson, the Prose Edda, Gylfaginning. Okay, listen. Next, they made for themselves in the middle of the world a city which is called Asgard. Men call it Troy. Okay? You know where Troy is. It's modern-day Turkey. That was
correct.
The Asgard was the home of Odin. And Turkey and all that area is by Crete and Greece. Troy had some of his descendants, the Trojans, Troy. Okay, so Asgard is Troy. That connects Zeus and Odin. Odin is shown with one eye. If you go and look at my Facebook, I have a picture up of Odin. The one eye was when he hung himself on the tree for wisdom, and he lost an eye. Now, there'll be a lot of people that will tell me all the different meanings, that it's the third eye, or, it represents knowledge, or, whatever. And maybe all that's true. But it's a connection, and I'm going to show you who Zeus is here in a minute. And I'm going to show you why, to me, it's a mocking. When they do that one eye thing, it's a mocking of God. And I want to tell you, don't let me forget to tell you what was in the Catholic Church that I had seen when I was a child, when I was Catholic. I was raised Catholic. Okay, listen. This is from Valerius Maximus. It's his book called Memorable Deeds and Sayings, 1,000 Tales from Ancient Rome, page 14. All right, here we go. I apologize if this is a little shocking or it upsets people, but let's just get it out. The Jews had tried to corrupt Roman values with their cult of Jupiter Sabazius, so the praetor forced them to go back to their home. Cornelius Hispanus expelled the Chaldeans from the city and ordered them to leave Italy within 10 days to prevent them from making money out of their foreign science. The Jews had tried to pass their religion on to the Romans, so Hispanus expelled them from the city and demolished their private altars in the public places. The Senate decided that the temples of Isis and Serapis should be demolished, but none of the workers dared to touch the temples. The consul Lucius Aemilius Paulus took off his official striped toga, grabbed an axe, and smashed in the doors of the temple. I just told you that your Jehovah is Zeus. Jupiter Sabazius is Zeus. There is a stele in the British Museum called Zeus Sabazius. It is a man on a horse approaching a tree with an eagle at the top holding a snake. There's more than one of these steles floating around the world, and they're tucked in in museums. Not only that, bust of Valerius Maximus, bust of Zeus Sabazius were very common for Romans about 2,000 years ago, even earlier. Okay, so these people knew who Zeus Sabazius or Jupiter Sabazius was. And that is your Jehovah. And I'm sorry if that upsets people, but I've got to tell you what's in these books. Now, I've told you who Satan is. I've told you who Jehovah is, that they have different names around the world. To me, Yahweh would be Cronus. I believe that whole Bible is encoded with different names for this family. They have like Most High God, Adonai, Jehovah, Cronus. If you go into another scholar named Sanchonathan's book called The Ancient Fragments, containing what remains of the writings of Sanchonathan, Berosus, Abydenus, Megathenus, and also Manetho. And then it's called History of the Ancient World. This comes out of the British Library. It is the entire story of Tyre, ancient Tyre, and Cronus, and what happened. And may I continue, Michael?
Yeah, just let you know, like right now, I'm on and off trying to finish this book up, but it's Solving the Mystery of Babylon the Great by Edward Hendries, who is another ex-Roman Catholic. So, and it he ties in the Jews and how they actually created the Roman Catholic Church. So don't worry about our audience.
Yes, they did. oh, thank you, and for bringing that up again. Listen, when I went to church, and I had to do all that kneeling in front of the priest and confessing my sins as a little child, and be traumatized by all of that. When I went up, when we were in the church during the Mass, as a child, I went to St. James in Lamont, Illinois. I would look up above the altar, and they had stained glass window. And they had stained glass windows all over that church. That's very common with Catholics. Beautiful scenes of the crucifixion, all the crucifixion and the what happened to Jesus and all that. But up above the altar, there was a round window of stained glass, and it was raised, and it was an eye, blue eye, just an eye, above the whole altar in that church. It's a Kabbalah model. That's what it is. That's what your altar is. And that could be a whole show in itself. But I just want you to be aware to start looking at some of these old churches because they put it up in your face. In fact, I was out in New York. I think it was St. John's Cathedral. It's a very old Gothic, beautiful cathedral made out of marble. All these carvings of the angels and everything. On the outside, on the feet of one of these figures is a Kabbalah model. I put that in my videos and on my Facebook, and it'll be in a book I'm going to be working on. Next to that beautiful cathedral, they get this. They have a children's garden, and it's the most bizarre thing you've ever seen. And it's smack next to this church. And in it, it's got like a crab and the sun. It's some bizarre sculpture. And at the bottom of it, it's got an upside-down head of Satan with horns. And I'm like, what? What is this? This is a children's garden right next to the church? And you can argue with me that that's artistic and it's part of mythology, it's Pan, whatever. You know, it's your interpretation. But I'll have a picture. I've had that out on my videos, and I'll have that in my book that I'm going to be doing. But it's bizarre. And so it's the point is the symbolism is up in your face and always has been. So this information is hidden in these books. You know, there are hundreds of books. And like I said, Sanchonathan talks about the history of the world and his cosmogony. And he talks about what Uranus, which would be your Sumerian Anu, did to his wife. And there was basically there was a female goddess from Sumerian mythology that created this colony. And she was murdered along with her husband by the great-grandson. And he took over. Now, that would be your Sumerian Anu is equivalent to your Greek Uranus. Uranus was a tyrant. And he had a sister wife, Gaia. And they're the ones that created all the Titans. And Cronus was a Titan. And he would sleep around and have all these children. And his wife didn't like that, so she kind of left him. And he would come back and beat her up, rape her, threaten to murder her children, and just generally harass her over and over. And her children and her would have to defend themselves against Uranus. Now, Gaia had a friend named Thoth, and Thoth is different than the son of Zeus, Hermes. Okay, Thoth came before. Thoth is one of these ancient Egyptian gods of writing. He would help Gaia defend herself, and he would help the children be defended as well. And he taught Cronus how to defend himself as he grew up. And eventually, with all of the abuse, Cronus killed his father and castrated him because they couldn't take it anymore. And Cronus took over. Now, when Cronus took over, you got to remember in those days there was no 911, so you're on your own. And unfortunately, Cronus decided to control the people with ritual. And he created the ritual of human sacrifice of children. And he started off with his own children. And he said, we're going to do this to bring in prosperity. And he frightened the people, and they didn't know what to think of him. And so he made control in control that way. Let me read a little bit of this. This is okay. But by other wives, Uranus had much issue. Whereabout Ge, being grieved and jealous, reproached Uranus, so that they parted from each other. But Uranus, though he had parted from her, yet by force, returned whenever he pleased, and having laid with her, again departed. Moreover, he attempted to kill the children he had by her. Ge also often defended or avenged herself, gathering unto her auxiliary powers. But when Cronus came to man's age, by the advice and assistance of Hermes Trismegistus, that's Thoth, who was his secretary, he opposed his father Uranus, that he might avenge his mother. And Cronus had children, Persephone and Athena. Now we repeat names, so this is not the children of Zeus. These names are used over and over. There's multiple Apollos, multiple Persephones, multiple Athenas, and so on. Okay, now, the former died a virgin, but by the advice of Athena and Hermes, Cronus made of iron a scimitar and a spear. Then Hermes, addressing the allies of Cronus with magic words, wrought in them a keen desire to fight against Uranus in behalf of Ge. And thus Cronus, overcoming Uranus in battle, drove him from his kingdom and succeeded him in the imperial power. In the battle was taken a well-beloved concubine of Uranus who was pregnant. Cronus gave her in marriage to Dagon. and she was delivered and called the child Demerun. Now this continues on. It talks about Cronus killed one of his brothers, Atlas. It says, after Cronus, suspecting his own brother Atlas by the advice of Hermes, threw him into a deep cavern in the earth and buried him. Atlas is another name for Iapetus. He taught astrology, which is the same thing that the fallen angel Baraquiel did. Okay, so Atlas, Iapetus would be a fallen angel, and he was thrown into a cavern by Cronus. Also, let me continue on here. As I told you, Cronus took over, and he ruled by force and fear. But listen here. This is for your audience. But the auxiliaries of Elis, who is Cronus, were called Elohim, as it were, the allies of Cronus. They were so called after Cronus. And Cronus, having a son, Sadidus, dispatched him with his own sword, because he held him in suspicion, and with his own hand deprived his son of life. And in like manner he cut off the head of his daughter, so that all the gods were amazed at the mind of Cronus. But in process of time, Uranus, being in banishment, sent his daughter Astarte with two other sisters, Rhea and Dione, to cut off Cronus by deceit. But Cronus took the damsels and married them, being his own sisters. Okay, it continues on. He rules. Okay, listen. In the 32nd year of his power and reign, Elis, who is Cronus, having laid an ambuscade for his father Uranus in a certain place in the middle of the earth, and having gotten him into his hands, dismembers him near fountains and rivers. There Uranus was consecrated, and his spirit was separated, and the blood of his parts dropped into the fountains and the waters of the rivers, and the place is shewed even to this day. Okay, so I just told you, you got that thing about Uranus and the water, and, his foam came up and created, Aphrodite, Okay, let me read this. This is where the origin of circumcision, which is genital mutilation of boys, which should be outlawed in my opinion. Cronus, also going about the habitable world, gave to his daughter Athena the kingdom of Attica, and when they happened to plague and mortality, Cronus offered up his son as a sacrifice to his father Uranus, and circumcised himself, and forced his allies to do the same. And not long afterwards, he consecrated after his death another son called Muth, whom he had with Rhea. Him the Phoenicians called Death and Pluto. Okay, now that's important because you never see Pluto or Hades having children, even though they say Persephone is his wife. Okay, that's encoded, and I'm going to tell you why. Basically, Cronus ruled by force and fear, and people were afraid of him, but Zeus took over. Now, either Zeus took over by force or was given it by Cronus. I'm not quite sure, but he took over. Eventually, Zeus had a child with his own daughter, Persephone, who was the daughter of Demeter, and that child's name was Zagreus. Zagreus was supposed to be the heir to the kingdom. Zagreus was killed as a toddler by Titans, who distracted him by giving him a mirror to look at, and they stabbed him to death, chopped him up, dismembered him, and ate him, and all that was left was the heart. Now, there's variation in these mythologies, but some say that, when Athena found the heart, Zeus took it, that he made a potion. Now, either he drank the potion or he gave it to Semele before he impregnated her, but that potion was supposed to have the soul of Zagreus, which Zeus was going to reincarnate. And this is what's in the mythology. I'm not making it up, okay? This is what is in these books. This is what I'm discovering. This isn't something that I'm making up. So he impregnated Semele, and she gave birth to Dionysus. And Dionysus is supposed to be the reincarnation of Zagreus. He is the Sacred Heart bloodline. That is where your heart comes from in all of your Catholicism. Now, also remember that the Aztecs...
Sacred Heart bloodline. That's fascinating.
Sacred Heart bloodline.
So because it's self-evident that the pictures, the imagery that they present as who Jesus Christ is not who Jesus Christ is. And this picture of Jesus Christ holding the heart, is this the same person we're talking about, Fig?
Jesus Christ came afterwards, and there'll be people today that tell you he didn't exist, which is a bunch of bunk, because I believe he's buried in Kashmir, and you could believe what you want. You could look at a place called Rosabal, but you also can look online, and there's various YouTube videos of the apostles and disciples buried in India. I think Thomas, they actually went in and took a video of, I think it was Thomas, has a whole tomb in India. And these people were buried all over India. They're buried, these disciples and apostles, and in Europe. So to deny that Jesus Christ existed is ridiculous, because why would you have a tomb to one of these apostles in India then?
Well, I'm a believer of Jesus Christ, and I'm a believer of the Bible today from my research. But the reason why I'm asking you this is because you see this, replete the Roman Catholic Church and Jewry are clearly pantheistic and pagan.
I think they're they're hiding the history of who your God is. I think they are, and people are going to get upset with what I'm saying, but I think they know darn well what they're doing.
Right,
and I think they lie and they control the people through these imaginary stories that there's truth to it, but they won't tell you the truth, and that's something people have to come to terms with. Because
why do you think they're hiding the truth? Power?
Well, as we talked about previously, there's a bloodline.
Okay.
I've told you who the pharaohs were. Okay, King Tut was a descendant of Osiris, and most European men are genetically related to King Tut, or King Tut is related to most European men. Okay, so you're of that bloodline. These Europeans are of this Zeus bloodline, this God bloodline, the sons of God, the children of God, the sons and daughters of God. Right? Didn't Jesus say something like, like the children of God? But he says he's the son of man. Okay, I have to look into the way that he said it.
Well, if you're in the Bible, it will say that it says that if you believe on his name, then you are one of the sons of God.
Right, something like that. He said, okay, so either you're genetically it or you're spiritually it. Okay, so there's this bloodline, but there's also a bloodline of Seth, who is Satan.
Right.
And that bloodline was not exterminated. We don't know where that bloodline went. All that I can tell you is it was in Egypt, it went into Syria, and I don't know where else it went. And some in Greek, but they left out of Greece. They went into Syria.
The scriptures would say that that there is. It talks about two different bloodlines. There's the wheat and the tares.
Oh, that's amazing.
Right?
Really? Okay,
yeah,
that makes sense.
The whole New Testament.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And if you're one of the wheat, then you believe on Jesus Christ, or I think what you're trying to say that Jesus Christ could be the same as what's his name again?
Dionysus.
Zeus.
Oh, he's the bloodline of Zeus. Yeah.
And then Satan or Lucifer, Apollo.
No, Apollo. No. See, they're confusing you. They're putting this disinfo out there. See, you guys, Apollyon is not Apollo. Apollo was the son of Zeus. He is not Satan. They're putting disinfo out because they know you don't. See, they know you don't know this history. They know you don't know it. Okay, that's the problem.
Well, in the Book of Revelations, it says that
Apollyon. Yeah, I know. I've seen that.
Yeah.
He's the guard of hell, right? He opens it up to let the demons out.
Oh, interesting. Very good.
He's a guard. Am I correct on that? I'll have to look that up.
Well, the problem is what.
I'm going to have to look that up. But Apollyon is not Satan. Satan has many names.
Lucifer.
But here, listen to me. If you don't believe me, go look at the Church of Satan website, and they'll tell you that Satan's a modern-day Prometheus. Go look at the Church of Set. It has the upside-down pentagram. They just they put it out in your face. It's like right up in your face because you don't know what it is. You don't understand that because I'm like the only person that's telling you right now. Although that some of the previous people tried, they alluded to it with that Babylon's book and such, but
which is
basically,
Hasselhoff's book.
Yeah. I mean, people are starting to catch it, but they didn't catch it. Really, the key is you have to have the written library. You have to have this. I had to go through over 500 books and other books, from the British Library, to try and put all this together and look at art and look at artifacts. But the point is, and that's interesting. Wheat and the tears. Okay, you have two bloodlines, but you also have bloodlines of the Titans. You have. What about the rest of the people in the world? The Indian people were said to be autochtons, which means they were always there. I'm talking about India from India. Okay, the Indian people. They were always there. The Greeks were always there. They try and tell us things like, oh, we all came out of Africa from one race. Well, no, because you can't. You can't because if only Europeans have Neanderthal DNA now, is what they're telling us, and nobody else on the planet has that. How did that happen? And Neanderthal is older than modern man.
Yeah.
Okay, so even so these, and if you question this stuff,
the problem that I'm discovering, Rita, is that it's 2016, supposedly.
Yeah.
I will be doing a show about the guide to the Phantom Dark Ages, but the fact is we know hardly anything. Everything they tell us about, even with the cosmology, the heliocentric model, it's all based on theory. Still to this day, most of it's not been proven.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the past history, if we just look at the past 15 years with 9/11 onward and the wars and all that, and how they have scripted it from the get-go and have been in control of the narrative, we will never know the full truth of why and what happened on 9/11, although it seems self-evident that 19 Muslims with box cutters didn't do it.
Yeah, a lot of strangeness to that whole situation.
And even the date that they use seems to be very sacred to this group of people.
It's all ritual.
And the Kabbalah, the Kabbalistic nature of it all, the fact that Kabbalah is heavily influencing us in our lives today. So, I respect what you're doing because we have to be willing to dig in deeper because, unfortunately, our pastors don't really know what they're talking about. Our professors don't really know what they're talking about.
Well, even your pastors won't even uphold your Bible words. Look at them. They won't say what's right and wrong. They're afraid because they'll lose their 501c status, right?
Yeah, well, yes.
They won't stand up for what's right or wrong.
Well, the church and the state have always been hand in bed together. It doesn't matter what. You can be Protestants, you can be Catholics, you can be whatever. It doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is they've always been in bed together. So, yeah, I mean, the truth is a lonely warrior. And if you really want to know the truth and you find other people that are really willing to pursue the truth, you got to be willing to work together on this, regardless of where we're coming from. And realize that you and I are not enemies. We're just simply trying to find the truth.
Correct.
We're simple people, We're just.
Well, here's how I look at it. Okay, and people might be like, oh, why are you? She's talking about mythology and paganism. Okay, but just think of it this way. When someone asks you what color is the sky, most of us are going to say blue, right?
Right.
Okay, well, as an artist, when I look at the sky, to me it's dependent on the time of day, what is the weather. It could be gray. It could be a sunset with purples and oranges or reds. It could be a sunrise with yellows and oranges. The clouds are white. There's more detail than just saying the sky is blue.
Yeah.
Okay, do you understand? Yes, you're correct in part of what you're saying. The sky is partially blue, but I'm going to add in the detail to the rest of what the sky is. And that's how I look at my material.
At nighttime, it's black, right?
Black. Yes.
But it's interesting because I've really been doing a lot of research on this heliocentric model and the geocentric model, and it's just bizarre because it's at this point. You know what? Just as we don't know, we hardly understand our past and these Cronides and whether the ruling elite and these giants.
Bloodlines. It's all bloodlines. It's bloodlines.
We still don't even know. I argue that you and I, don't even know truly what a world looks like. Honestly, when I know that sounds profound and radical, but once you realize that the heliocentric model is still theory to this day, and and many of my audience don't believe the moon.
Now, I'm going to add that.
Why are all these planets named after these gods that you're talking about? Why is these names still in our lives? Supposedly, in 2016, names that had only meaning 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago.
They had meaning over thousands.
Why are we still with them?
Because they know what the origin is of their god and their stories. Let me just say this. These Cronides wrote their story in the sky. You know why? Because humans can't destroy the stars. They can blow up your temples. They'll burn your books. They'll kill your wise women and men. But they can't destroy the sky and the stars. Oh. And that's what they used to tell time. That's how they knew. Okay, I don't want to get you upset about your ideas of the heliocentric or flat Earth, round Earth. I have my beliefs on that. You have yours. Right. But look at astrology or astronomy, or whatever you want to call it. The astrology, okay, the zodiac. They figured things. The reason that these Cronides had power, and it was forbidden knowledge, because Barackwell, who's Iapetus, taught astrology, is because they could understand how the seasons worked based on the stars, because they knew the time of the year. They knew the patterns. Sure. And they could formulate the three-dimensional models in their mind of what, where we have to be in space or whatever the situation is for the sun to rise in that zodiac. Uh-huh. And you'll have a zodiac in an ancient Jewish synagogue, okay? That's there. The Egyptians had a zodiac. The Aztecs and the Mayans had a zodiac. Everybody had it. The Stonehenge is round. It's all about that knowledge, which is important to crops, farming.
Right.
Okay? Because you're not a hunter-gatherer when you're a farmer. You better know how the seasons work. Okay? It's a whole different mindset. So, I'm more like I'm more heliocentric, round Earth thing, and people are getting upset with that too. I mean, these days, everything you say, somebody opposes, but it has to do with understanding the zodiac and imagining those three-dimensional models. Now, remember, the Catholic Church put so many incredibly brilliant minds to death because of the knowledge they had.
Yeah.
Okay, do you know how many people that they tortured? Even though they really went after the women. The things that they did.
A bare minimum of 50 million in Europe alone. But
man.
When you look at the Jesuits and their own responsibility in this, what we call the Western Hemisphere, they say that it was all, accidental. But the germ warfare, they've known about germ warfare for hundreds,
sure they have.
Thousands.
That's how they spread the Black Plague. They brought that in deliberately.
They definitely did that, but they're bringing in the tickets and all that. And
they've been trying to kill Europeans off for a long time.
And I believe that, if the Jesuits and the rabbis, there's a reason why they wear black, and they're practitioners of the black arts.
Yes, cults of Saturn. Right. They do doesn't your Bible say that all of those animal sacrifices that they do, and they do consider non-Jewish people to be animals, that God never wanted that? He had nothing to do with that. That's not what he's about. That's an abomination, and that would have been an abomination to Zeus. He wasn't about that. He would go after these terrible people who did abominable things, and he instructed his children to do so. The reason we're farmers and we have this is because of that family. Otherwise, I don't even know if we'd be around. We'd be killing and eating each other and just terrible things.
It's a
hard pulling out. And let me just. The Aztecs were pulling hearts out to make the sun god live, right? The sun god, Huitzilopochtli, would be Zeus. Yeah. They messed up the whole mythology. Remember I said Zagreus' heart? He had to reincarnate that bloodline to save the human race, to make better, because Dionysus was the one who had to teach as well as the other children. Well, they screwed in I'll get all the Aztecs mad, but they screwed it up. Somebody just fouled up the whole story, and they were pulling hearts out of people, and they were cannibals in Mexico. When the Spanish came in, I think it was Bernal Diaz wrote a book. They had these women and children in cages, fattening them up to be eaten, and it was the royal part of these families, not the average Aztec citizen or the average Mayan. It wasn't the average person doing this. Those average people were fed the Three Sisters diet. It was the royalty. So you got to ask, who are these
what did you call it? The Three Sister diet?
The beans, the corn, and the squash. Right? You've ever heard that? The beans, squash, and corn or maize. That's what they would grow.
Okay.
But who were these royal bloodlines in the Americas? And
well, I'm sorry if I track here, but it is all relevant. What you're talking about, it's true. When they came to the Central South America, and I imagine even here, although you don't really hear a lot about North America, but there was archaeology proving that they were eating each other here. There seems to be...
America, Dr. Christy Turner proved that out. He wrote the book Man Corn.
Yeah.
He got a lot of flack. Oh, yeah, he got a lot of hatred for that. But he proved it out.
Man Corn, that's fascinating.
Man Corn. Yeah.
Wow. Is there a plant verse here, or?
Because you're the dinner, pretty much. But he wrote about it. He wrote the book, and
our own ancestors. I'm part Native American, Cherokee, Ojibwe, and European. So it doesn't matter where if you want to look in Europe, Western Europe's the heritage and the genealogy.
Well, the Neanderthals were being the victim. In the caves where they'd find it was whole families of Neanderthals that got hacked and eaten.
Yeah, and they got France and
Germany. But who was doing it? They won't. Who was doing it? That's was it a giant? Who was doing it, or was it just the average? Another family. This is what they can't tell you.
The ruling elite, and that's now we're going back to where you're heading. The ruling elite. Who were the ruling elite then? And it seems to me, like you're saying, they had a different type of genetics and a different type of group of people.
And their heads slope back. There's something different about them. It's a different species. Yeah. And that's the other thing they're hiding.
And there's the other thing, too. We look at and a lot of these quote-unquote Christians and Nephilim and all that kind of stuff. They're finding these skulls and they're saying everything's the Nephilim. It's like they're just mocking us still, and it's just like it's con artists and the Good Old Boy Network that's telling us, well, these are the Nephilim and all that. Well, instead of telling us, or at least admitting that, well, we found some skulls, but we're not quite sure who they are. Let's move on and keep on working. But they want to fit they want the narrative to solely fit their concept of what the Bible is.
Well, the other thing though too. Now remember that these natives did head binding to emulate. It was also done not just genetically that it was something different, but the regular, the ones that were left in these royal and noble bloodlines, they were head binding to emulate that slope back large head. It distinguished them from the average citizen.
Right.
And there's evidence they did do some head binding. And the Chinook, Native Americans, when I think the Spanish came in or something, would watch. They started as a baby, They do the head binding. So they did have some evidence of modification. But some of those skulls, like down in Peru, there's just no way. The capacity is so large that a head binding is going to do that.
Right.
It's just no way. And then on top of it, they have red hair. And then I want to tell you about the red hair. There's a lot of controversy about that. That's something I've gotten a lot of harassment on YouTube for, even by PhDs who've come on and come after me. They're trying to push this notion that when you die and put a body under the ground, that your hair magically turns red.
Right.
No, and I actually went out and found a paper it's called Taphonomy, What Happens to the Body When You Die. And there were people that actually went out and studied this, and they said, no, you have to look at every individual case. It could be a fungus that makes it red. It could be naturally red. They could have dyed it red. Oxidation only occurs, and by the way, they all would say oxidation. It's oxidation. That's why their hair is red. But I say, okay, but if you're buried under the ground, you're out of the sun. To have oxidation, the hair has to be exposed to the sun. So how can you be either wrapped up in a cave, completely out of the sun, or buried under the ground, completely out of the sun, and then you still have oxidation? And they can't explain it. They get and they start questioning me of what my background is. What degree do you have, Rita? You're not a PhD. What degree do you have? And I'm like, well, I have a master's in bioinformatics, and I, can read. And you have an article on the National Center for Biological Information about what happens to hair after a person dies. And it says you have to look at every case individually. And if you have something not exposed to the sunlight, there's no way it's oxidation. If that was true, then why don't you have a bunch of Siberians walking around with red hair after being out in the sun?
Well, you see, this is the problem. You see, here's a fine example of what we're dealing with in 2016, allegedly. That, this religion, the priestcraft of scientism, that, if I write a paper or I have a degree behind my name, that I am something, and you must listen to me because I know more than you. And the truth of the matter is, we are still operating largely on theory.
Oh, it's not just theory; it's a bunch of lies. If you ask these people, as I asked this PhD on YouTube, I said, and I gave her a link to a Asian princess that was 2,000 years old, and she's on Wikipedia. The pictures of her. I said, look, her hair is as black as coal. How do you explain that it didn't magically turn red? And she can't, and she can't. They can't, because they're full of it. It's just, and they start calling me a Nazi, a white supremacist. I've been called. I've been told to paint a swastika. They told me I don't know what I'm talking about.
Let's deal with that right now, Rita.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be disrespectful. Are you a Nazi?
No. My husband's part Jewish.
Well, I didn't think you were either. But, now you know. That's not a Nazi. So, well, I think what the thing is, we all are dreadfully fearful of ever having our worldview challenged. And to might find out once again, now I'm 48 and a half, almost 49, so almost a half a century old, and I have over and over and over again have just been experiencing how many times I've been wrong compared to being right, especially about my worldview and about history, the past, present, etc. So I think what you're doing is very important. So I hope I didn't derail you from.
No,
because this is actually a good time to end episode 1 of our conversation, so that it's not too long as far as the recording goes.
Yeah, it's so much that people can listen to at a time. And
you really are throwing a lot at people, especially when it comes to this. This Cronaides, these who Zeus is, who Prometheus is. Who are these characters, and why are they still in our lives? You know what I mean? We could say, well, it's because of our Roman and Greek roots. Maybe.
No, it's your history. These are your ancestors that they're lying and hiding from you.
Right, and so they give you worthless things like the Da Vinci Code or something like that when you were actually dealing in something that's much more profound.
Look in the mirror. You're a child of God. Okay?
Yeah.
Are you going to act accordingly? You're going to do the right thing in life, or are you going to not? You make that decision. Now I told you what it is. I could tell you a lot more about history. I could tell you about the Amazons and everything else and
I hope so.
other things. But I gave you the starts, and you can look all this up. Your audience can look it up. They can order the books online if they don't believe me. You could buy those. Any of these books that I'm talking about, you could go buy through Amazon.com.
Sure. I think this has been a wonderful experience, at least for me, Rita, and I sure hope you do come back on. It's going to challenge my audience, that's for sure. It's going to challenge me, but there's things in here that there is some truth being shared here, folks, that we just have not had the opportunity to hear. So I do appreciate what you're doing. Please stay on. Don't hang up on me, okay?
All right.
I'm just going to close the show up. Once again, Rita Moran, Regine Moran, Hidden Human Story. They go on YouTube. I've got it obviously in the information box on her website, and give it a shot. Just listen to it. Is there plausibility behind it? What is going on? And before we go, I'll read a little bit here. This is from Rita's website. Human sacrifice to feed the giants. The gods and goddesses were giants. It's starting to look like she's got a very strong argument here. Some demanded human sacrifice. Why? That's a darn good question. Because if you think about it, it's against disadvantageous for the average person to allow their child or loved one to be eaten or sacrificed. Why were they doing this? They demanded it because they were giants with ferocious appetites. When they died off and their half-bred offsprings took over, they continued the practice even when their size did not require it. And then she says, look at her in the Book of Enoch. So, great stuff, Rita. I really am enjoying listening to you. You really are, and I'm sorry if I kind of took you this way or that way a little bit, but it's only because of where I'm coming from. But I really think that what you're doing is quite special. I think it's wonderful. So check it out, folks. So take care. God bless, folks. And let's see what's going on.